It's Tuesday. You're here. I'm here. What do you say we celebrate by talking Trek with our Star Trek pals? It's Mission Log Live. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Tonight, from Star Trek to Star Wars to Batman to Blu-rays, our guest has something to say about all of it. He's Brian Ward from the Arkham Sessions podcast, also a longtime Trek fan and a panelist on the long-running Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars panel at Comic-Con. You want in on this conversation? Of course you do. You can click on the link to our Zoom meeting, or you can use the one tap from your smartphone. You can also call us. We would love it if you did. 669-900-6833 is the phone number to call. 669-900-6833. Then you enter the meeting code that you'll find in the show description and the comments. Then the floor is yours. Floor not included.
Hey, you know what I'd like to do right now, Ken? And that's say hello to some of our friends who are watching. You got Thomas, you got Jordan, you got Paul, you got Mary, you got Barry, you got Kim, we got Tracy Lee Coco, hashtag bring back Lieutenant J. They're all there in the chat and Facebook saying hi back to all of you. And we certainly hope to have you participate in tonight's conversation. Now, if you are watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, thank you. If you are watching us not live, well, thank you as well. If you are listening to the audio-only version of the show, well, we hope we sound as good as we look. Remember, though, it's not just about this show. The Roddenberry Podcast Network is a network of podcasts. Very clever. It's all available at podcast.roddenberry.com. Over there, you'll find Mission Log Live, The Trek Files, Women at Warp, and Priority One. Got to catch them all at podcast.roddenberry.com. And wherever, whenever you might be enjoying our fun little diversion, remember, hit like, hit share, write a review, or give us 5 stars.
All of the above would be fine. That would really be fantastic. Hey, we want to tell you about some stuff coming up for Mission Log and Mission Log Live. Let's talk about the VR thing first. Next Thursday, oh man, the trivia thing is getting so dangerous. It's getting so scary at this point. We're already down to 2. I know what you're thinking. Weren't there supposed to be 3 people? There were supposed to be 3 people, but I think one got scared. Actually, unfortunately, one just can't make it. But next week, we have the final round, the finale of the trivia tournament that we've been doing. That is Thursday, the 13th of December. So we're excited about that. As far as other events that we're doing, we're kicking around a bunch. We're working on a new space in the VR space that we're hoping to bring people into. So right after the first of the year, I expect stuff to pop off for us. But there's other stuff to do in Sansar. Like, John, I know you saw this on Facebook earlier this week. They're having a comedy show next Monday night, and it's 5 comedians, not in the Nexus, but just an event in Sansar that they're welcoming people into. I mean, the stuff that we do, we're obviously very excited about, but there's a ton of really cool stuff out there as well. So definitely join us on the 13th for the final round of the trivia challenge. But then, just poke around other places. Go to an ancient Egyptian ruin. Go to the moon. Go all kinds of places. Sansar.com is the place to check it all out. So that's us in the virtual space. But then back here in Meat Space, John.
Yeah, back here in Meat Space on the live show. So slight change in programming. Tonight we're welcoming Brian. We missed Dr. Drea Letamendi. She would have been here with us tonight. Unfortunately, she is a little under the weather. So we're exactly half as excited to have the other half of her show, the Arkham Sessions. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, coming up on December 11th, we will be talking about The Brightest Star. That is the episode of the Discovery Short Track airing on December 6th. That is the show focusing on Saru. We will have 2 special guests with us. We've actually rescheduled 2 Guys, 1 Trek. We wanted to change our programming a little bit to specifically fit the Saru storyline. So you just have to find out about that next week. Now, we will be off Tuesday, December 25th and Tuesday, January 1st. Hope you all have amazing holidays. January 3rd is the airing of the Harry Mudd short trek, The Escape Artist. So we will be talking about that on January 8th. And then January 17th, Disco is back. So each Tuesday after a new episode of Star Trek Discovery, you will be able to join us here to talk about those episodes. Ken, let's go to the polls.
Why don't we?
I missed the show last week. How'd it go?
I know. Fine. I mean, it seemed to go well. People called in, which, doesn't always happen. Rod kept his cursing down to, I think, 2 incidents, one of which got removed. So the people listening saying, well, I heard the one, but where's the other one? Oh, don't bother. It's gone now. But, it was a good time. I know you were off gallivanting as some...
I was. Yeah, every now and then, guys got to take a break. So
sure,
quality time with my parents. It was really nice. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So then we did. Go ahead.
I would say thank you for not burning the place down while I was gone.
Well, I'm not there. Had I been there, there's no telling. Yeah. We did actually do a poll though, which you were going to go ahead and talk about. We did a poll while you were gone that was about stuff and things.
Yeah, stuff and things. You asked, are we capable of a Star Trek-like future? Now, our audience, the full 72% of you said yes. That's nice that we have an optimistic audience. 72% said yes, 28% said no. I feel like that could be a much longer and in-depth conversation than just the hour on the live show. So maybe that's a topic to revisit somewhere down the road.
Well, I mean, doing Star Trek, it feels like you ought to revisit that quite a bit, right? I mean,
like every week, if you're you and me. Yeah.
Well, like every week, if you're you and me, depending on which series you're watching, but we won't talk about that right now. Hey, we do have a poll question this week in honor of the whole Star Trek. And listen, it doesn't have to be Star Trek versus Star Wars, but it is. Okay, that's the conversation that we're having right now. We all agree that we like them both, but comes down to brass tacks. You're on that island that people are always sent to where you can only take one franchise with you for some reason. Now, the smart money's on McDonald's, but
yes.
You can only take Star Wars. That's not what we're doing today, though. The question that we have for the poll today, worst daddy issues, Spock or Luke Skywalker? Who's got the worst daddy issues? Right now, people say Luke Skywalker does. It's 74% Luke Skywalker, 26% Spock. I personally have feelings about that, and maybe we'll get to them later in the show. But the poll is out there right now. The question to you, worst daddy issues, Spock or Luke Skywalker? Go to our page on Facebook, facebook.com/missionlogpod, and you can vote in that poll or cast your straw in that poll all the way through this time next week.
So, Ken, I hope that you and all of our guests, all of our listeners tonight know that I was only kidding when I said that we are half as excited. I am 100% excited to have our guest with us tonight. He is the co-host of the Arkham Sessions with Dr. Drea Letamendi. He is a producer at Shout Factory. He is, of course, a panelist from the Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars, a panel held 5 times at various conventions. And he is a Trek fan from way back. In fact, he is so into it, he owns his own Monster Maroon. This guy is not messing around. Please, friends, welcome my friend, Brian Ward. How are you tonight, Brian?
I'm doing very well, John. How are you?
Excellent, man. And I'd like to see you representing there. You have the Starfleet Academy shirt on, but you do own a Monster Maroon.
I do. I thought it'd be a little weird to be wearing it on the show, this video, but yes,
it's too weird here. Yeah, but did you get that for a convention or a special event? Or
I swore to myself since I saw Wrath of Khan in theaters twice when I was a child that one day I would own that uniform. So I'm not going to lie. The moment that Anovos decided to put it out, I instantly bought it.
Had to be yours.
It took over a year for them to give it to me, but I instantly bought it.
Attention, John Cooley. Attention, John Cooley.
Let me ask a question really quickly, and this is far too geeky, but it's a live Star Trek podcast, so who cares? What'd you do about the pants? Did you buy the whole outfit, or did you just buy the the jacket and then figured you'd fake the rest?
No, I got the whole thing.
Nice.
Bravo.
All right.
Bravo.
Yeah. And had to get the vintage boots just to can't skimp.
Right. Wow. Nicely done, man. Well, all right. So take us back. You said that this was a dream since Wrath of Khan. So just walk us through your Trek story. Just kind of lay the groundwork here for our listeners.
My love of Star Trek, God, that dates back to the second grade, probably. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. My father was in the military, so we happened to be stationed in Nashville, just outside or something. And it was playing at 6 o'clock every night. So we literally ate dinner to watching Star Trek 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday. I would come into play from playing just to see the next episode. And it got to a point where I didn't even care that I may have seen the same episodes over and over again. There were other shows that once I realized there were no new shows, I got into other things. But with Star Trek, I could just watch the original series over and over and over. It once the movies started coming out, that was it for me.
So did that stuff lead you to, because I know that you've worked in entertainment for a number of years and you've been a producer at Shout Factory. Was it your love of science fiction or Star Trek or sort of the magic of that led you down that path, or was that something else?
Totally. It was the magic of Hollywood. So even as a small kid, I could see the difference between the original series and, say, Wrath of Khan, which inevitably was the first of the features that I had seen. I don't know that I would have been able to comprehend, the motion picture before the excitement of Wrath of Khan. But probably still, I shouldn't have seen Wrath of Khan. You know what? I'm going to go back because it totally wasn't the second grade, because I saw Wrath of Khan in from Wee Willie's daycare, and I saw it twice. Nice. I might not have been the right age to see that movie twice, but I did. But yeah, like I could see the difference in budget between the original series and the movies, and I could see the magic of movie making. And so from a very young age, the moment I could see how things were done, that's all I wanted to watch. Whenever Fox would have, this Friday, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is coming out in theaters, so we've got this special hosted by Pierce Brosnan. I had to watch every minute of that just because I wanted to see how movies were made. And that eventually, and of course, the grandfather of them all probably is the making of Thriller. Seeing those things made me want to do what I'm doing now.
Man, that was some specific deep diving. I mean, I think we all remember the making of Thriller very, very well. That was a seminal experience for me watching that on MTV. But for you to pull out the making of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, hosted by Pierce Brosnan, that is...
Well, it's hosted by a Brit for a movie that... doesn't have a Brit.
Did not have the good sense to hire a Brit in the role.
And I guess technically Brosnan's not a Brit, but he's UK, so it's all fun.
Hey, before we get to Star Wars versus Star Trek, or Star Trek versus Star Wars, because I see people in the chat just so ready to chime in on this. I want to lay a little bit more groundwork with you, though. We're podcasters. You're a podcaster. You host a little show called the Arkham Sessions. Can you please tell us a bit about that, your journey into that?
Absolutely. So my wife is a clinical psychologist, a very geeky clinical psychologist by the name of Dr. Andrea Letamendi. And she has an unwavering love of Batman, specifically Batman, the animated series. It's what got her into geekdom when she was a small child. It is actually what opened the door to psychology for her. The moment she started seeing people that were messed up, she wanted to know what was wrong with them, or as she would say now, what happened to them. And over the years, she ended up becoming a consultant for Gail Simone when she was writing for Batgirl. Drea is now written into canon as Barbara Gordon's therapist in Batgirl. And she has carried that love of Batman with her entire life. And so we decided that we were going to do a podcast dedicated to the psychology of Batman, the animated series, where we go episode by episode. And literally this past Friday, I think it was, this past Friday, finished Batman the Animated Series, and the new Batman Adventures. So our mission is complete. Now it's a question of where do we go from here?
Do you go to Batman Beyond, or do you go back to some of the old TV series?
We might do Batman Beyond. We're kind of up in the air. We haven't announced those plans yet, mostly because it's hard to find a series that continued such deep themes as the animated series and the new Batman Adventures. We found that Batman Beyond is basically a sort of kick-butt action adventure show that has a couple of episodes here and there. But I kid you not when I say that Drea was able to look at every single episode, even the ones that were considered the worst, Critters and just really bad episodes when you're thinking of entertainment value. But she was able to pull psychology, real life psychology, and give life lessons. And it's not like we're not looking for self-help, but what it is she's able to go, oh, well, you know what that is? Where he's showing signs of this. And this is what this is. And having this doesn't make you a bad person. And this is how we would treat this. And here are real life examples and, all that stuff. And it gives us an opportunity to pick on Bruce Wayne a little bit too, because that guy's not normal.
See, I was going to ask actually, and forgive me, because I know we're supposed to be doing Star Trek, Star Wars, but I mean, you guys do start from the premise that Batman / Bruce Wayne is messed up. I mean, I'm sorry that something happened to him.
I start from that premise. Drea starts from the premise of he's doing the best with what he has. So she chooses to look at him as someone who is coping in a way that he feels he needs to. But she has warmed up to the idea that he doesn't always make the best decisions. And one of those decisions is keeping the people closest to him a little too far from him. So she is happy that there is a Bat family, but agrees that they need to be a little closer and a little more influential in his decision making.
Interesting.
Wow, that is very well said. 669-900-6833 for you to call in and join us in the conversation, or click on the Zoom link and you will be here on video with the three of us as we dive into our conversation about the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars. Now, very important to include those first two words, the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars. We got people really worked up because they saw this and they're like, Star Trek versus I love them both. How dare you? Isn't there room for Idic? Isn't there room for both, etc.?
No.
Tell us about the 5 iterations of the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars. What's the premise? And then we can kind of do the deep dive.
I'm more interested in knowing which one you specifically, John, think is better. I think everybody wants to know which one is better and which one John Champion thinks is better.
Yeah. And then we're going to get into who's my favorite Bond, and then
right.
it'll just become a mess. It'll become bloody chaos on the show. Yeah.
The psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars literally started because Drea, if there's a love that she has that rivals Batman, it's Star Wars. And she has a very good friend and colleague, Dr. Ali Matu, who is a hardcore Star Trek fan, will rival anyone on Star Trek. And the two of them would constantly battle. And it got to a point where I suggested we need to turn this into a panel at I think we started at WonderCon in 2012 or 13. And he would come out from New York, and we would get a co-panelist per side, someone who was either a writer or an expert or a cast member, and they would sort of bat clean up for the psychologist who would battle. It'd be questions like Khan versus Vader. Because you've got someone who was bred to be a tyrant or a lord of whatever, and you had got someone who was turned into a tyrant, and so we would tackle things like which of the two handled the psychology better or more realistic. And you were on one of those iterations. You were on the second one that we did at Comic-Con the first year.
Yeah, and that's where I met Dr. Matu, and he's been on our show, and he's just such a wealth of insight into Star Trek, and he's wonderful. But this is what I wanted to get into because I think you present that question provocatively so. Star Trek versus Star Wars, and people get very worked up, and they think it's an either
it
or.
puts butts in the seats.
It does.
Star Trek versus Star Wars, and you were there. You can attest to the fact that they were turning away people at the door. It became a popular enough panel at WonderCon and Comic-Con that they kept inviting Drea back. She wasn't even submitting anymore. They were just like, "Do you want to do another one?" And
nice.
So.
Well, okay, I'm sort of jumping to the end. Will there be any more? Because you've done 5. I mean, I don't know if you feel like you've exhausted the topic.
I don't think we've exhausted the topic. The real problem is, as I mentioned, we've basically only done them at WonderCon and Comic-Con. And one of these days we should go over to the East Coast and do it in New York in Ali's home turf. But getting Ali out to Anaheim and San Diego has been a little difficult. He's been really busy the last, couple of years. So, so getting him out here to do that has been a little problematic, and we don't feel like we could do it without him. So, I think, especially after our last one, it's not where we want to end. We want to come back for another one. It's just a question of how we can make it work logistically. But if you're posed a question like, the Kobayashi Maru versus the Dagobah Cave, which one is a better test of, your own psychology? That's an argument I want to hear versus Millennium Falcon versus Enterprise.
Right. Well, because we know the Enterprise would win. Moving on. By the way, one of our listeners says, "Hey, how about STLV?" And I would certainly be down for that at Vegas. I don't know if
would we be welcome at a that's like walking into the lion's den. You're like, if you bring in a Star Wars anything, I feel like that's just setting us up.
No, honestly, you'd be welcome there. There have been a lot of people who've been doing cosplay and things in recent years that have either been sort of a mashup of the two, or sometimes it's just straight up Star Wars. And then I want to say the Avengers were there a couple of years ago for reasons that I can't quite explain.
Wow.
I don't think I would expect to win. I mean, if you're taking the Star Wars side, I don't think I would expect to win, just because, yeah, you're right. It's thousands of people who are there. Each one of them able to do that, absolutely no problem. I'm sorry, do the Vulcan, the Vulcan hand gesture. Absolutely no problem. So, the table might be tilted a tiny bit, but yeah, you'd be absolutely welcome. Plus it's Vegas, everybody's welcome. They got $5 to spend.
Yeah, and no desire to see sunlight. The really good thing about this panel is I grew up a fan of both. Star Wars, I probably would say, was the first movie I saw in theaters. I have a legitimate love of both of them, as does everyone. When we say the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars, like I said, it's literally to get butts in the seats. We know, if you see the ones that we put online on YouTube, spoiler alert, there's never a winner. It's too obvious, that we love it all, but they always end up being really fun. A lot of playful jabs back and forth. I seem to remember yours had a number of them. It was you and Brian Young, and so there was a lot of playful jabbing back and forth.
Right. Well, I was very lucky to have Ali on my side. Again, I would go into intellectual battle with him on my side any day of the week. But Brian and I got to play off each other a bit.
Yeah, but Drea and whatever teammate she's on always ends up bringing it. Because I am of the camp of, when you're talking real life science, whether it's technical or medical or neurological, Star Trek is probably going to have the upper hand on a franchise built on fantasy characters. The wizard, the pirate, they're sort of 1 to 2-ish dimensional characters versus Star Trek. And so I've always been surprised with the arguments they've been able to bring to the table. And now that you've got Clone Wars and you've got shows like that, Rebels, that have been able to actually get deep into character, I'm like, Star Wars is kind of bringing it right now. So my favorite iteration of the panel series so far was Drea teamed up with Sam Witwer, who plays Darth Maul on the Clone Wars, and Ali teamed up with Rod Roddenberry, a friend of your show, obviously.
You've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that panel is Rod openly admitted that he grew up more a Star Wars fan, and Sam admitted that he grew up more a Star Trek fan. So every question would end with Drea and Ali battling it, but then their counterparts going, look, you made a good argument, but I'm going to have to go over here on this one, until it got to a point where they basically should have just switched seats.
Nice. Well, look, that's kind of the whole point of this thing. That's why I wanted to have you on, and that's why this is such a cool conversation. Again, provocatively putting it out there as Star Trek versus Star Wars, but really it comes down to what we do on Mission Log. It's not about, at the end of the day, whether an episode is good or bad, is one better than another. It's about the idea that's at the center. What is the heart of the show? What is it trying to say? So I was absolutely fascinated that you and Drea would pull together these questions that pit a psychological concept from one or the other against each other. I thought that was such a cool approach. We have a caller standing by. John, you're on the phone. You like to chime in?
Oh, hey. Yeah, hey, it's John. How you doing, guys?
Hey, what's up, John?
Hey, I had kind of I don't know if it's a unique point of view on Star Trek versus Star Wars, but I have a tendency to play with both. And, I dig them both. But it is funny how, the idea of pitting Star Wars versus Star Trek, gets everybody's attention, gets everybody's dander up. But I think what's really funny is for a select few of us that are part of a very specific generation, it's a no-win scenario of a question. And I don't want to take up too many parsecs of your time. But there's this idea, there was a study that I read many years ago, I have to look up who actually did it, that suggested that Americans particularly, if they gravitate towards a sports team that is successful between the ages of 8 and 13, that they will be a fan of that particular team for the rest of their lives. What's interesting is for those of us born in the early 70s who perhaps found Star Trek and then 77 happened and there's Star Wars, we kind of have two teams. It's like being a fan of, I suppose, the Orioles and the Yankees at the same time. It's like, what do you do? And it's one of those things where you're always going to like one or the other. And what I've found is that if there are fans that are younger, that skew younger, that weren't at that magic point between the original trilogy happening and then the desert for the original trilogy and the resurgence of Star Trek with motion picture and then TNG as we get into the 80s, that they're pretty much Star Wars fans. Or even if they like Star Trek, Star Wars, they pretty much skew closer to the Star Wars side. But those early 70s kids like me, and I'm kind of dating myself, there's this little sweet spot there where, we'll probably love one more than the other, but it's almost like asking us to pick a favorite child. Like what do you want more? There have been some fun experiences that I've seen over the years at conventions or whatever, where people will come up to us and perhaps if say something's on display, something Star Wars, something Star Trek, they're right next to each other. I had one kid one day who was just beside himself, and he started breathing heavily. His face turned red, and he said, "Star Wars and Star Trek together in one place. This is an abomination." And I just remember thinking that was so interesting, and I'll let him be Schrodinger's fan. I won't tell you which one he fell on either way, whether he was more Star Wars or more Star Trek. But the indignation was what I found interesting in that situation was that there is, for some people, this disconnect, this idea that you can't like both.
Right.
You gotta pick one or the other.
You go the opposite. You go the opposite way, though. It's really interesting. I was talking to, I was in my mid to late 20s, I guess. I was talking to a coworker at a radio station where I worked who was in his mid 40s, I think. And talking about Star Wars because I did all the time. I was a fan of Star Trek, obviously, but Star Wars still was well, it hit the 7-year-old in me, like you're talking about. And this guy who was 20 years my senior said, well, kids have that today. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do kids have today? He's like, well, yeah, Independence Day. And, he started naming like all these different science fiction films. And I was like, dude, no, just stop. And then the closest thing I could get him to, honestly, was I was like, do you remember what 2001 was like for you? And he was like, yeah, that was mind blowing. I was like, okay, that's Star Wars. And Independence Day is not that, because we've all been hit so much by so much stuff basically since 83. I mean,
Well, yeah, you said a couple of weeks ago, you said that since 77 on, our generation was nailed with science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's true. It's been nonstop since 77. We'll forget about, ice pirates and stuff like that.
Don't you dare forget about ice pirates.
No,
that's the thing.
Stars. No Battle Beyond the Stars love.
Yes.
I was going to say, you can't forget like Tron and Battle Beyond the Stars and The Last Starfighter. And I mean, just like all of these things that were just like, oh, well, it's science fiction because kids love that. And yeah, I can't speak for every kid out there, but I personally I think I learned early to discern between good and terrible. And the terrible can still be enjoyable, but like Crawl happened, for crying out loud.
Ken, good and terrible, or good versus evil?
Well, but
darkness rises, the light rises to meet it. Star Trek happens, Star Wars, everything balances out and homogenizes down to two. Have you ever noticed that? There's two superpowers. There's two sports teams that are rivals, and there's two things.
There were two franchises, and I think you're absolutely right. And there's certainly something to be said about being a child and latching on to that one fandom because it can't be replaced. But if you notice, what we're talking about is two pivotal moments where you've got Star Trek, and then a bunch of things that sort of tried to emulate it. And then Star Wars and a bunch of things that tried to emulate it. But it still comes down to the two that were the most successful. Even if Star Trek was the most successful in the ratings, it certainly permeated the culture, and the fans are what ended up bringing it back. Now, what I do find interesting about your hypothesis is the idea that Star Trek is in for generations of woe at this point, because Star Wars is taking over every child, for the last several years. I mean, there are Phantom Menace fans and original prequel or prequel fans that may not even know Star Trek, and there are fans of the new franchise and the animated series that have come between, and Star Trek's not given us the strength that it used to. So this conversation might come to an end very quickly simply because future generations cease to remember Star Trek.
Yeah.
I would refute that, though. And the reason I would refute it is because
you're a Star Trek fan.
Well, I was kind of a Star Wars fan, but I would refute it just because Star Trek's on the rise. We see all this great things happening for the franchise right now. We've got a Captain Picard series coming. We have an animated series coming. Star Trek Discovery is incredibly successful, and so I see the franchise in a sort of state of renewal right now. My daughter will wear a Star Trek pin on her jean jacket, and maybe not too many people recognize what it is, but then she comes home from school the other day and she goes, hey, somebody recognized my insignia. And I'm like, really? Good. That's cool. And so I think we're maybe at this point of renewal where, everything's cyclical, right? And so maybe we're due for a resurgence of the franchise. I see great things coming for the franchise.
My fingers are crossed. And by no stretch of the imagination am I a gatekeeper of any kind whatsoever. Star Trek is Star Trek. If you love any iteration of it, that's amazing. But a lot of people would argue that the Star Trek that they're falling in love with right now is not necessarily what they grew up with, and I'm okay with that. People can have their own versions, but like if you're in the Star Trek Discovery conversation, are you in the same conversation as the original series and the Next Gen and DS9?
Well, I think those are all. See, it's interesting. It's the same conversation, different accent.
Yes,
because like if I run home to Mama, it's the TOS. I mean, I'm a Kirk. If I cosplay something, it's Kirk. If I identify with someone, it's Kirk. And yet, there's room for more. See, what's great about Gene's invention here is that it's infinitely malleable. One of my major sort of hangups right now is so many people, for instance, talking about the upcoming comedic animated series who are like, well, that's not Star Trek. Well, why would you seek to put boundaries on what Star Trek can be? My idea of Star Trek is
that be funny.
Yeah, and Star Trek, especially as a TOS fan, there was humor. There has always been humor present in Star Trek. Perhaps it's sly, perhaps there's a wink, perhaps there's just an arched eyebrow. But Star Trek has always been, to me, at times, very funny. Even in those moments where something could be dire, there might be a joke to break the tension, and that's a mirror of real life. I mean, people do that in the worst situations possible. In combat, somebody will crack a joke. And so the idea that, no, Star Trek must be this thing, I think is somewhat narrow-minded. I think Star Trek can be many things. It has been many things already between the original series and the animated series, the motion picture. Star Trek's been rebooting itself since 1964.
That's a great point. Yeah.
John, thank you very much for calling in tonight, man. We really do appreciate it.
No, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. LLAP, and may the force be with you.
And also with you. 669-900-6833 is the phone number to call. 669-900-6833. We have a tiny bit of business that we have to do, but I want to raise one thing really quickly with Brian. I hear what you're saying. I hear what John was saying as well. My one concern is discoverability. And I don't want to get into the whole, question of should it be on pay TV and all of that stuff, but you have to kind of seek out Star Trek right now, which sort of kills the discoverability part. Disney, on the other hand, is starting a YouTube channel to get young kids into Star Wars. That's my concern is not so much that there's not going to be enough Star Trek, but how easy is it going to be for people to find?
I agree 100%. And YouTube especially. I know generations. I know people at work who have basically been raised on YouTube. They don't watch television anymore. And that's not to say that they wouldn't necessarily subscribe to the CBS app, but they're not. But they've got no problem subscribing to YouTube because of the amount of content and the different types of content. And the fact that Disney is just making it easy for those people to find Star Wars, not just in movie theaters, but on various television channels and at Disneyland, for God's sakes. Star Wars is just really, really accessible right now, and for all of the and part of that is the giant of Disney too. I mean, the merchandising is, you can't go into Target without seeing Star Wars. You can't go into, but I'm not seeing too many Discovery backpacks going to, elementary schools. So it's a juggernaut.
I don't think elementary kids should be watching Discovery.
Well, and therein lies the problem as well.
Yeah.
And that's why you need a comedic animated series to get you in, or you need some sort of
the Academy show. You need all the other iterations.
Yeah,
I agree. And honestly, I really have high hopes for the animated comedic show, just because I want fans to be able to laugh at themselves and laugh at the things that are funny in Star Trek. I really have high hopes for that. and all the other Star Trek shows. Because, like our caller was saying, I think it can exist in so many permutations that we shouldn't limit ourselves to one definition of what Trek is.
Hey, Brian, we need to ask you just to hang on for 1 second because we have a bit of business that we do need to take care of. And that is for the people who stand behind this show, our good friends at Eagle Moss and the official Star Trek Discovery Starships collection. Discovery, maybe it's not for kids, but it's for you, and it's back right now. It's kind of back because we're in the short tracks, and then it'll be back in the next month. We'll all be meeting a brand new Captain Pike for the very first time. Yes. Eagle Moss wants you to get a discovery of your very own, as well as a whole bunch of other ships from that Star Trek series. They are all part of the Eagle Moss Discovery Starships collection.
On the Federation side, you have ships like the Shenzhou, this little bad boy that I got in my hands right here, and the Discovery, of course, as well as the Corella, the Europa, so many more. Have a look at them on screen here in the video. And then on the Klingon side, you have that newly imagined bird of prey. You got the Koch-class destroyer, and so much more coming.
Now, when you go to eaglemoss.com/discovery starships, you're going to see renderings that serve as the basis for the die-cast models themselves, painstakingly reproduced, as always, under the supervision of Star Trek expert Ben Robinson. Officially authorized by CBS Studios, these things are 6 to 10 inches from bow to stern, depending on which ship you're talking about. They are hand-painted. They are rich in detail. Each comes with the awesome magazine full of awesome real-world and awesome in-universe information, unless it's not the best ship, in which case it's still good information about the in-universe stuff. And, of course, each comes with a display stand suitable for displaying your ship.
I love how they put the ship and the stand together to make them suitable for each other.
It's very helpful, yeah.
Subscribers will get their first ship, the USS Shenzhou NCC 1227, for only $9.95 with free shipping. Additional models, including the iconic USS Discovery NCC 1031, will then ship monthly for the special subscribers price of only $44.95 each. That is 20% off the standard retail price, also with free shipping.
Now, people who want to pick and choose their ships can do that too. For that, you go to shop.eaglemoss.com, or you can head to your local comic shop. You're going to pay about $10 more at each of those places, but saving money isn't the only reason to subscribe. Subscribers also get free gifts worth over $100 during their subscription. And of course, you can cancel your subscription at any time.
So to subscribe, you'll go to eaglemoss.com/discovery starships. To buy individually, go to shop.eaglemoss.com. And a huge thanks to Eagle Moss for sponsoring this week's show.
669-900-6833 is the phone number to call, 669-900-6833. Or you can hit the one tap on your smartphone to join the Zoom meeting, or go to facebook.com/missionlogpod, which is probably where you are right now. So there's no point in going there again, and clicking the Zoom link as well. Hey, I've got a question for you, Brian. I mean, in all of the times that you did these panels, what's been the most surprising thing that you've heard? What's been the thing that you were like, I never, ever, ever would have thought I would ever agree with that, and now here I am agreeing?
Ooh, man, that is rough. when you have Dr. Matu and Dr. Letamendi talking, you find yourself agreeing with everything they're both saying at any given moment. And that's sort of the beauty of my job, is I've always been the moderator. So I'm not supposed to take a side. But it's gotten hard, and every time I think I'm on a side, it switches when the other one has some sort of retort. They really are masters at their craft. I don't know that I can remember one specific thing. I do know that, and I can only tease it by saying, that it was by Sam Witwer and Ron Roddenberry both. I think it's one of the reasons why it's my favorite iteration of the panel, is that the two of them talked about it with a love and respect for each franchise in such a way that it became almost like it was like a church-like experience. and you found yourself agreeing with everything, even if you wanted to walk out of that conversation going, but I love Star Wars or I love Star Trek. You couldn't deny the things they were saying. And so, yeah, I don't know that I have a certain thing that I heard, but the two people that I heard were Rod and Sam for sure. And again, Ali and Drea are incredible.
We have a couple of comments here that I think we should address. First of all, Earl says, so I think we can all agree tonight that the winner is Doctor Who, right? So we'll throw that out there. And then on the theme of psychology, Chris says, more Freudian, a lightsaber or Kirk's rock in What Are Little Girls Made Of? Don't know if either of you want to address that. Both very controversial topics there.
Yeah, those are the real hard hitters that will that we cover on the panel for sure. Yeah. I find myself, and this is a conversation that Dre and I have frequently. Usually, when I want to like sort of poke her, when I want to poke the bear, I bring up the fact that Star Trek is so much more full of psychology, primarily because I have a strong belief that Picard never left the Nexus. Therefore, that guy is just full of, all of these things that have happened post Generations really show that Picard's got a lot going on. And she'll often, try to battle me back with, various things. But I have a very firm belief that everything post Generations is just sort of happening in the imagination of Picard. So,
well, wait, even the other series, like
DS9 for sure, because Worf crosses over.
Oh, okay.
Voyager, you can say didn't, because I can't remember. I'm not as big a Voyager fan, but I don't think there was a lot of crossover on that one.
You have Admiral Janeway in the movie coming
right.
Yeah, but that's just a guy remembering a person that really exists. So that is okay. She can cross over into his world. What he can't do is cross over to hers.
Okay. Right.
No, like there was a whole, I'm sure that this has been a topic of conversation before, but I've always been troubled by the fact that in Generations, when he meets Ghost Guinan in the Nexus, he asks if he can leave, and she simply responds by saying, "Where would you go?" And she never says you can leave. And I'm not sure the Nexus works that way. It's a ribbon that's going through space. No one said it could back up if you decided you didn't want to be in it anymore. The whole point of being in the Nexus is that it puts you wherever you want to be at any moment and give you any life you wanted. Therefore, he wanted to save the day.
And he wanted Kirk to die.
And whatever it took. He wanted Kirk to have the sacrifice that he deserved, the heroic death that he deserved, not to, putting some stuff in a console and getting ripped out into space. But I think, the idea that suddenly we're playing with physics that weren't introduced earlier on is weird. So as far as I'm concerned, and you look at Picard's character post Generations, completely changes. He becomes an action hero. That is a wish fulfillment if I've ever seen it. I just can't get on board.
I'm having so many hard times now. I apologize. I'm having so many hard times with what you're doing, because then I want to step immediately out and go, okay, well, we obviously know that the Nexus was so they could bring Kirk in and have him be there at the same time. But you're right, because then if you're like, okay, but now it's part of that universe, you're blowing my mind, dude. Hey, really, can I do, John, I think you had something else to say, but can I do the promo really quickly, and then we'll get to our caller? And okay, because we do have another caller on the line, and there's still time for at least one more after that. 669-900-6833 is the phone number to call, or you can click the Zoom or use the thing from your smartphone and be on the video part with us as well. Before we get to our next caller, though, I want to remind you that after this show, there's a whole other show that we would love for you to stick around for. Priority One, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, takes the airwaves every Tuesday at 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific. Elijah, Kenna, and Anthony bring you news from all over the Star Trek multiverse, TV and movie news, gaming news, literary reviews, and a ton of other stuff too. So don't walk away from your computer, or, if you do, it's probably a laptop, so just take it with you where you go. Just redirect to facebook.com/PriorityOnePodcast. If you cannot stay for the live show tonight, don't forget they publish every Friday as well. And you can find that wherever you get podcasts or podcast.roddenberry.com. So do that and join them, and won't that be fun?
Brian's discussion just it launched a whole idea in my head. We've heard about the Picard series. I believe they announced today or yesterday that it'll premiere in late 2019, which I think the odds were that's when it would premiere. The whole thing, the whole series, I don't care how many seasons it runs, Christmas with the Picards. That'll be the whole thing, episode after episode. Yep.
Yeah, I think if anything, it proves that that's not what he wanted. He wanted a life of adventure on the Enterprise. He wanted to save his crew on the planet. He wanted to save the moon. He wanted that was his family. And that's what he wanted to get back to. So the Nexus let him, but it didn't give him up.
There you go. We have a caller standing by. Camel, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Hey, welcome to the show. What can we do for you tonight?
Well, gentlemen, thank you for taking my call, first of all. I'm trying to watch it on Facebook and listen to you on the phone, and the time dilation's kind of tricky, you know what I mean?
Of course.
I grew up watching the original series, from a little kid on up, and been a science fiction fan all my life. I won't say yay or nay. Star Trek wins hands down versus Star Wars, just so that people will know. But Star Wars has its place as well as Star Trek. But I prefer Star Trek because it is about the human race. You know what I'm saying? And it's had so much psychology, so many lessons to be learned through my life. I quote Star Trek all the time. I live in Star Trek world. I want to jump in and say that I believe that a lot of today's inventions, you've heard this, the trickle down technology, Kirk with the communicator, and we got cell phones, you know what I'm saying? They're on the verge of making a tricorder. Well, your smartphone's literally a tricorder. The only thing they won't give us is phasers, but can you blame them for that?
Yeah, not with the road rage we have in LA. So no, don't want any phasers. Yeah. Right. I've said that. I says, yeah, keep the phasers out of it until the human race obviously evolves to the point that we can handle them with care. You know what I'm saying? Right.
I also like the fact that the Federation of Planets, I do believe is real. I'm just saying that I believe it's real. We just don't know about it yet. And it would be neat if it, like in First Contact, the Vulcans saw our warp signature and decided to come check us out. You know what I'm saying? And thanks to that.
Yeah, agreed. We hope that it's a benevolent race that finds us. That would be the way to go.
Exactly, and let's hope it is the Vulcans. I'm just saying that. I want to put a punch in for Gene Roddenberry and Rod Roddenberry. Gene's vision of the future is fantastic, and I believe that it is plausible and possible. Do you know what I'm saying?
Excellent. Camel, thank you so much for your call, and please join us again anytime, okay?
Absolutely, gentlemen. I'll be watching.
All right. Cheers. We'll look for you next time.
I certainly think that his vision of the future is possible, but it would require a race like the Vulcans to come down and make first contact for it. We're not getting there on our own. It would require someone going, guys, there's a whole thing out there that you need to be aware of, and let us show you and take your hand. And that's where the That's where it's all gonna.
Well, see, I look forward to the day that we find anything, even if it's a bacteria. We find any evidence of something outside of the Earth. I hope that will be a bonding moment. I hope that it's not a first contact situation where we have to wait to get attacked before we learn that we have to work together. But yeah.
Hey, there's a thing that we do every week, Brian. I'm sure you know about it because I'm sure John told you about it. We do a thing called the lightning round every week. John did, of course, tell you about that.
Yeah. See, we haven't talked in a while, and I just linked to the show, but
I'm familiar with the show.
Oh, see? There you go.
All right.
There you go.
Well, then, you know exactly what to do when I say favorite Star Trek movie.
2, Wrath of Khan.
Favorite Star Trek starship.
Reliant.
Ooh.
Nice.
100%.
Ichaya, Porthos, or Spot?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Implying that the others were not.
I'm going to go with Porthos.
Nice. Good choice. Borg Queen, yes or no?
Yeah.
Mm. Favorite Star Trek?
I mean, but it all happens in the Nexus, so it's fine.
Oh, that's a good point. Favorite Star? Well, no. Wait a minute. You said Voyager didn't, though, and the Borg Queen shows up there as well.
Oh.
Well, anyway, we'll come back to that in like 5 to 7 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Favorite Star Trek bad guy?
Oh, cool. You know what? I'm just going to say Khan.
That's fine. I mean, he's a good bad guy as bad guys go. Damjot or Dabo?
Dabo.
Yeah, and finally, Brian, have you ever been to Vulcan, Alberta, Canada?
Never.
All right.
Wow.
But now I want to go.
You're on the list. Now you're on the list. We're going to do our giant bus caravan up to Vulcan, Alberta, Canada. We're going to have Mission Log Pod Fest 2026, and you're now on the list.
Excellent.
2026, man. That's
that's
quite a while from now, but okay.
Yeah. All in the Nexus, Ken. It's all
I know.
In the Nexus. Brian, if people are looking for you online, I assume they should look for the Arkham Sessions. They would find that where?
You can find the Arkham Sessions. We're on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. There's also, you can certainly find us on iTunes or Spotify, but probably wherever you're listening to Mission Log, except Facebook. We are on Facebook, but we don't stream live. And you can also find me on Twitter. I am at bward028.
Nice.
I got to say, we just finished TNG earlier this year. And I know that for me, finishing TNG was a very difficult thing because that is my Star Trek. Those are my characters. I was listening to a show of yours recently, and I'm sorry for your loss, dude. And I know it sounds like I'm kidding, but I'm not. I mean, as attached as you guys probably are with the show that you've been doing, and doing it week after week after week, it's got to be kind of weird now.
We're trying to figure out where to go from here.
Yeah.
We want to continue with the deep characters and the richness that people like Paul Dini gave us, and we'll see if we can get there with Batman Beyond or Justice League or Superman.
Well, hopefully people will tune in and find out where you go next. In the meantime, want to let people know Mission Log Live is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Technical production on Mission Log Live by Infinity Networks. Producer Brandon Bradley. Be sure to check out the Mission Log shop. Just go to missionlogpodcast.com and click on shop. Bunch of designs there for you to check out that you can get on shirts, that you can get on, stickers, and oh yes, tapestries. missionlogpodcast.com and then just click shop. Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from the Roddenberry Podcast Network, including not just Mission Log and Mission Log Live, but also Women at Warp, Priority One, and the Trek Files. Thanks to everybody who joined us live or later, and we will talk to you next week.